Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Well, it's the day after Christmas, so I hope everyone has had a awesome Christmas. I my This Christmas was kind of the best ever. We kind of got to have, well, for me, got to have two Christmases. It was really nice. I don't usually have like two separate kind of Christmas celebrations. I spent the Christmas Eve day and night with my girlfriend, and then we made and ate lots of delicious food. And then we woke up Christmas morning and opened up all kinds of super cool presents from Santa Claus. I guess we were pretty nice this year and not so naughty. So usually it's a lot more fun to be naughty than nice. So it was, but hey, it pays off as far as what Santa believes, and how when he makes the list. So anyway, we woke up Christmas morning, did our present thing. It was beautiful. It was awesome. We took our time, and then we went to my parents afterwards. Drove down there and had a whole nother Christmas celebration. So it was awesome, and I got a lot of amazing gifts. And the best part of it was the first white Christmas in many many years that I can remember. Yeah, I'd say the last time we had snow here in Maine for Christmas, like Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, was probably like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. I remember we had a major snowstorm. I think we got like a foot of snow late Christmas Eve night into Christmas Day, and it was like whiteout conditions, and it was intense, like a real big storm. We had like a foot of snow, but it was windy and it was very stormy. But this year it was beautiful because it snowed on Christmas Eve, the night before Christmas Eve. It started in like 2 or 3 in the morning, and went all the way until about 1 o'clock or so on Christmas Eve. So it was nice. We got about 5 or 6 inches of snow here, at least in Northport, and it was beautiful. And then the coolest part was like when my girlfriend and I got up in the morning and had some coffee, and then we did presents. It actually started snowing then, and it was like that the Christmas snow globe uh, picture. It was pretty awesome. And so today's show is on, of course, movies. I got some killer movies this year from Santa Claus. So today is going to be a review on the first of those movies. And this movie that I'm going to be talking about today, I'm a huge fan of. I watched this again last night, and I just think this movie is easily, and I this movie made my top horror films of the year of 2024. We have just a little under a week or so left to this year, and this year there is a lot of great, fantastic horror films that came out. I was really impressed, and it was funny because going into this year, I felt as far as new releases, you know, as far as new releases go, I felt it was kind of a dismal year and off to a rough start. And there were some films that I was really anticipating, and then I was really, really let down by. Movies like the biggest one for me was Alien Romulus, and there were a few others, but along the way came a handful of these other films that were just great and really great. And so today I'm going to be talking about this really unique slasher film, best way I can describe it, in a violent nature. I got this from Santa Claus. I got a Blu-ray edition of this. This is a really amazing package. It's there's two discs. There's the movie itself, the full-length feature. This film came out this year, I believe, 2024, and it's got a bonus disc with all kinds of special features. And I watched this again last night, and this movie is just really really awesome. I just I feel like I've seen this movie about um, think I've seen it. This was my third time watching this movie. I watched it when it first came out. I got it on DVD, and I found myself really getting into this film. It's kind of a slow burn, but as it was going along, I found myself really liking it. I watched it on DVD, of course, for the first time, and I got it the week that it came out on DVD. I did not get a chance to see it in the theater. It would have been really cool to see it in the theater. So, and then about a month or two ago, I was over at Buddy's house and we watched In a Violent Nature on online. It was I don't know if we watched it through. I think we watched it through Netflix, and it was a movie that I had told my friend about, saying I think this is a really cool movie. It's really unique. He really liked it, and we watched it, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it again, and I found myself almost enjoying it more. And so I asked Santa Claus to get this because I had not seen it on Blu-ray, and I was like, this movie, the way, especially this, the way this film is shot, which I will be getting into, I was like, this will be, if I got a really good edition of this film on Blu-ray, this will probably be pretty magical. And so I asked Santa Claus, and luckily I was not too naughty this year, and I got this movie on Blu-ray, and it's incredible. It's everything that I thought it would be. The transfer, the experience. This movie is such a visual experience, and yeah, there's so many great things to talk about this movie and to kind of unpack. And especially, I found myself after watching it last night, and I started watching it a little bit late. I started watching it, we had a long day of presents and eating food and all that kind of stuff. So I was a little bit, when I got home, I was a little bit tired. But I was like, fuck it, I'm going to start these movies. And so, because I've been really wanting and anticipating to see this movie on Blu-ray. And I started watching it late. And at the end of the movie, I was like, found myself even a feeling of having a better experience, a deeper appreciation for this movie. It was written and directed by Chris Nash. It was the whole film was shot in Canada, I believe. And the thing that's so interesting about this movie is, again, I've said my favorite world is the horror exploitation world, and my favorite style of film, my favorite genre is the slasher genre. And when you give me, and I should say too, I actually reviewed this movie before when I saw it on DVD. I did a review, so there is a review of this movie of it on DVD that you should check out. I know some people have checked out, but I have to say, after seeing it this way on Blu-ray, it was a whole different experience, a whole new experience. It like basically deleted that first experience because this was so much immersive, so much more interesting. And again, like I said, my favorite genre of filmmaking in the horror exploitation world is the slasher genre. That's my go-to genre. I can watch a slasher movie, any day of the week, any night of the week. You give me a good slasher, and I'm happier than a pig in shit, to be honest. And the slasher genre, for the most part, it is and it isn't, but it is a pretty straightforward storyline, or there's a certain kind of template or blueprint that most slashers follow, and things that you kind of expect to see as a fan. And there's tropes. There's along the way, there are like certain kinds of characteristics that you always see. There's always the scene or scenes of, a group of teenagers or young people that are either stuck in a cabin, stuck in a house, in the woods, at a lake, that is something we see most of the time, where a lot of slasher films take place in a really remote area in the woods, or by the, by the by a lake. Hence, Friday the 13th. There are, nature always plays a lot in the slasher films a lot of the times. But but typically it's that kind of thing. You have a group of teenagers or young people that are picked off one by one by the masked killer. There are, various ways that they are killed. So that's one trope that we always, from a storyline that we, part of that storyline or the allure of what makes a slasher film. The other big one is creative kills, where people are killed off in a very creative and very imaginative way. That's something that people look for in a slasher film. That's something I really look for in a slasher film. And the other aspect of it that's probably even bigger is my love of practical effects. I'm not. I mean, yes, there are great examples of where CGI is used, and it can work out very well, and it can create a beautiful, very rich atmosphere. But I think there's been too many times of where it it actually does the opposite and does not give you that real experience. So I'm all about practical effects. I love when there's a team of effects makers designing the gore, designing the monster suit, designing the the cameras, or designing a shot on how they can make all of those things work. To me, it's when you see really good practical effects, it's like seeing a really great, fantastic magic trick up close and personal. It's an art form, and I think that because it requires, well, a lot of imagination, but a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, pun intended, and it really, it gives the film, and it gives those scenes, an authenticity. Everything, and even in the world of production design, where everything is real, it feels organic, it feels lived in. It can get under your skin, and as a viewer, if it's done really well, again, I'm all about the atmosphere for a slasher movie and a horror movie. But when you have all of those things executed really well, you're immersed in that world. You're transported to that world for those 90 minutes or what have you. And so I'm all about that at the end of the day. And then you also have, in slasher films, you have other characteristics that you see typically in slasher films, is that there is copious amounts of sex, boobs and butts, naked male and naked female characters having sex. There's always a raunchiness to slasher films for the most part. They tend to be kind of sleazy, kind of dirty, kind of raw, a little bit nasty. And the other thing is, a lot of the times there's also kind of a sense of humor. There's a little bit of, even if it's in a subtle way, but there's a little bit of some kind of comedic underpinning to the narrative or to the story. And there's a kind of a silliness and something where it almost feels like you're at least for me, where you're at the feeling of like if you're at a great party and you don't want it to end, where it feels fun and just pure healthy escapism. So I feel like those are things that are, and then also slasher films tend to be about 99% of slasher films, including this one, are one of the things I think that makes these films so great and give it that grit, that gives it that kind of grittiness, that dirtiness to the film, is they're usually really low budget. compared to say big Hollywood films, you don't really see too many big, huge, budgeted Hollywood, stylized slasher films. Slasher films are always usually, in comparison to say big budget Hollywood films, slasher films are usually always made by, very independent directors and filmmakers, and they always have that crunch of trying to do as much as they can for as little. They have nothing in their bankroll, so they're stretched and pushed to where they can, milk that and get as much out of that as they can, which I think really works because it gives that, you can see the fun and the but you can see the passion. And I feel like because there's usually a lot of limitations compared to say big budget Hollywood films. They're in a crunch. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stress. So I typically feel like those things, even though those are, inherently tough for filmmakers, it gives the film a certain kind of urgency or a rawness to them. That's the other thing I love, and I feel like those ingredients for the most part are what, make that soup, as to, when all the ingredients are right and the soup is ready. That's when you get the kind of the definitive slasher film. But I also say too that a lot of people say, well, slasher films, people more on the outside, not necessarily fans of slasher films. A lot of people criticize and to a degree trash slasher films, saying, well, it's just they're all the same. They don't have their own personality. It's just about, a psycho killer at a summer camp killing off teenagers, blah blah blah, and that's all it is. And to a degree, that's correct. But throughout the ages, when you really take a little bit of a deep dive and you look into those films in the genre, the slasher genre that I kind of considered classics, they're actually really, like, yeah, there's a template that they all kind of follow, but to me, they are all uniquely different. There's something about them that makes them kind of stand apart from just, being forgetful or mindless. My favorite slasher film of all time, Maniac, for instance, is really unique unto itself. And then other slasher classics for me that I just love. I mean, again, I just did a big coverage on the Friday 13th franchise, my favorite horror franchise of all time. Looking at those movies, say, compared to Maniac, or movies like The Burning, or My Bloody Valentine, there are, there's so many films, Mad Men, there's so many films in the genre, and to me, when I just run off those names, yeah, they're definitely, or Black Christmas, especially Black Christmas. The New York Ripper is another one. When you look, when I just think of those movies, when I'm running them off the top of my head, they're all definitely, they're all gems in the genre of the slasher genre. But to me, they all are really unique. They all have something really different about each other. They all stand out. They have their own personality. So I feel like when people generalize a lot of the times and say that slasher films, well, they're just, that's all it is, and it's just generic, uh, you know, generic material that doesn't really say anything new. I often think, well, no, when you think just by running off those movies at the top of my head, and again, there's so many more. They're all unique and they all have their own kind of voice, and to me, they're very different from each other. So I feel like that really undermines and doesn't give the genre its credit that it deserves. And I think In a Violent Nature is really one of those movies. It truly stands out. And I think that this movie is, without a doubt, 100% a classic, a modern day classic slasher film. I love this movie. It's been, again, it's my third time watching this film. I loved it even more watching it last night. I just think it's a tremendous movie. It really is. This movie follows, the thing that's the most unique about this movie is which we've never seen in the genre. I've never seen it. I've never come across this viewpoint or angle in a slasher film. Is the the perspective that this film takes, where the whole film is basically taken. You're seeing the whole entire film. You're seeing everything kind of unfold from the perspective of the killer. We've never seen that before, and I just think that is so brilliant. I think it's kind of genius. I think it's really unique. The other thing is this movie takes place. I've even heard this. I've heard this film described as a nature film slash a slasher film, or a nature film meets a slasher film, and that is kind of true because this movie is unique in a way that it's kind of oddly relaxing, because you usually don't, typically in the slasher genre there are like the scenarios of kind of that's kind of where the term jump scare came out of. But the old school slasher films, typically now in a lot of horror films, when you see the jump scare, they're really predictable and you can kind of see them coming, a mile away. In the old school slasher films, before the term jump scare was used, there was a sense of dread and I guess a level of where it wasn't predictable and a level of suspense that sometimes you don't see now. And it wasn't, I don't know, it never felt like when you watch an old school, at least for me, when I watch an old school slasher film, from the 70s or the 80s or even in the 60s, going back to, say, Herschel Gordon Lewis, like Blood Feast, that it never, I don't know, it never feels like, like where it's so ridiculously predictable. It feels like it's natural, but it's generally surprising and it's generally uh, you know scary, and you don't see it coming. It doesn't feel like there's this thing of where it's paint by numbers per se, where sometimes that happens with a lot of newer horror films, which is unfortunate, and that's something that happens quite a bit. But with this film, the other thing that's so unique, and typically what you see in your classic slasher film, is the perspective that you're getting is from the victims, the cast, the teenagers, the young people who are being picked off, and it's them, and the killer is on the outside. He's out in the perimeter of what's going on, and it's him moving in, but you don't see it happening. You don't see his perspective, and typically we see it from the inside out. But this film has it from the perspective, you're seeing it from the outside in. And so it's really unique. You're seeing everything happen in real time. So there isn't that typical, jump out and scare you platform. There isn't the jump scare scenario that you don't see. You see it coming, but it's like slowly coming into sight of what is about to happen, because it's coming from the killer's perspective, and it's really unique, and it's really a whole different way of seeing this world. And that's the thing I think is the most, that by far for me, In a Violent Nature, that's why I feel like this movie is so unique and different, and a whole different experience than any other, from any other slasher movie I've seen. from the old school days to the newer, kind of crop of slasher films. And the other thing is typically slasher films and horror films, exploitation films always have a ton of great music, great score, like some kind of great symphonic score, or a lot of great electronica music, synths, you know, and the reliance of music is a really massive, massive component of what makes a great horror film. This movie literally has no music in it, and which again is so kind of genre bending in a lot of ways, makes it so unique and different. And there's literally no music in it. And the other thing is, all you're hearing and seeing is the beauty of the setting of where it takes place deep in the woods. This entire film takes place deep in the woods, and so all you're getting literally is the beautiful visuals of being in this gorgeous and vast forest, and all you're hearing from, as far as your auditory experience, is the sounds of nature. And it's an interesting juxtaposition because the kills in this movie again are just incredibly barbaric. It's super brutal. Some of the best kills. There's one scene, I call it the yoga slaying. It's got to be one of the most brutal kills and one of the most creative and imaginative kills I've ever seen in the history of cinema. It's jaw dropping. There are other kills in this film that are just really fucked up and just really demented. But the thing that's so cool about this movie is it's got that juxtaposition of where you're in nature and you're immersed in nature, and it's beautiful and meditative, and it's in such a weird way. But then you have all of these horrendously brutal, murderous things that happen. So there's this really cool, well, tension between those two kinds of situations or environments, and there's a lot of tension, but there's such a cool kind of like juxtaposition between those things, and I think it really creates a unique atmosphere and a really unique experience. So yeah, and again, that to me is another thing that really stands out with this film, that really gives it such a unique angle, that of where, as far as kind of where it's coming from, where Chris Nash is kind of coming from as the director and writer. Just really awesome. And it does have that trope, that template of where it's essentially a group of teenagers that are stuck in the woods, and they're by a lake, and they're getting picked off one by one. But the way the story is unfolded, the kind of the visual, the cinematography for this movie is just awesome. It's all like natural lighting. It's all natural. It feels like everything is kind of how it was during the shoot. Everything is like natural lighting. It's all like a natural environment. They did a really great job blending that too, so it feels like you're really in this world. Totally immersive. And there's that whole thing of where, you know, you get lost in it because of it. And it's got some of the most brutal kills that I have seen in recent times, and it's particularly around this one kill has got to be, I mean, it's jaw dropping, jaw dropping. The practical effects, the imagination behind this movie is so awesome and inspiring. Very, very cool. And it messes with your expectations, particularly around the ending. It ends in a very kind of strange, unique, and ambiguous kind of way, which you don't really see coming. You didn't really see it, you know, you, I, it wasn't predictable, and I loved I love that about this film is that it was like, huh, okay, that was interesting. What's that about? Huh, okay, cool. And it makes you think a little bit. And so it's such a unique film. Again, the transfer of seeing this on Blu-ray is astounding. It's just gorgeous. Easily the best way to see this movie, by far. And again, like I said, there's this is a beautiful, beautiful package. There's a bonus disc on here that is just really awesome, all about special features. And I which I started watching, and it's amazing. There's a really awesome documentary which I had no idea about, that Chris Nash in 2021 they attempted to film this movie before. This is the second time that they did this, and they obviously had success. But they tried filming this movie in 2021, and it was their entire the entire ordeal of them trying to film this movie in a violent nature was filmed, and there's a documentary about it, and it's one of the most interesting documentaries I've seen in a really long time, because they had it's literally a disaster, a series of disasters, one after another, and you see how fucking hard it is to make a movie. Like, it's unbelievable the shit that they went through to try to make this movie. And it resulted in where they basically couldn't make the movie. It failed their first attempt. And this documentary, there was like a camera crew following them, filming everything that was going on, and there's interviews, and it's fascinating because you really get a sense of like what a clusterfuck and how hard it is to make a movie, just from a technical standpoint. And it's so interesting, and I'm gonna probably watch it again. I watched probably about half of it last night, and it's so interesting. It's one of the most interesting things I've ever seen as far as special features. Which, and again, I had no idea that that was the case with this movie, but I can't recommend this movie enough, and especially the Blu-ray version. This really kicks ass. So thanks again, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.